On today's episode of Tony's Fords and Mustangs, we're going to talk about possibly the dumbest trip that anyone's ever attempted. I'm going to try to drive my 1977 Maverick from central Pennsylvania to the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Now, this is probably the first time in a long time that a 1977 Maverick has made an attempt on this type of journey. It's 5,800 miles there and back. That's if I go direct, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to detour, and if something's interesting, I'm going to stop and check it out. In preparation of that, I've got a new fuel tank to put in. I've got new fuel line to put in because there's been rust in my filter. I've also, if you take a look there, the rear window is currently out because it leaked. So I've cleaned up that area. I got a new seal, new glass going in. I'm also going to go over the whole car, and that's going to take place over the next month and a half. Plan to leave sometime in April. Yeah, probably not the best idea in the world. I tried this trip in my 70 Mustang. I'll put a link in the description. I tried to go across the Lincoln Highway with that car. Made it all the way to Gothenburg, Nebraska, when a rear axle bearing went out, and that kind of spelled disaster for the trip. I did find a great mechanic that took care of the car, got us in. 2 days later, the car was back on the road. At that point, though, my timeline had shrunk considerably. I'd lost 2 days on the trip, so we detoured and made our way up to Devil's Tower, and finally to Mustang Week in Sturgis, which I didn't even know was happening at the time. Just was a kind of a lucky thing that we bumped into that and then made it all the way back. I promised the 70 Mach 1 I wouldn't do that to the car again. I wouldn't put it through that. I made no such promises to this Maverick. So there's going to be a couple videos where I try to get this thing ready for this style trip. Today's video is going to be on the cooling system. I redid the entire thing because the water pump decided to make its own weep hole. Like many of the parts in this car, it was original 1977 Ford part. So the first thing I gotta do is drain the coolant out of this old rat here. And I just changed this out not that long ago, so I'm actually going to try to reuse it because that stuff's expensive. I also have my Adelphi headlamp on. I need this. Sorry about this. I'll try not to look at the camera as best I can. So I got lucky on this with my trans cooler lines, which are typically, they've been there since 1977, right? Came right out. So a 1/2 inch on one, 5/8 on the other. I've got the hoses out, got the trans lines out. So really got to do right now is just pull the rad, and that's next on the agenda. But I'm pretty happy with how things are progressing. Pretty happy. So the old nut plate on this side had enough. I figured it did its time, and yeah, that's it. So why do they make vice grips? And she's out. That's going to make getting in here now for the rest of this a lot easier. So I can pull the fan next, I get the water pump, and then go from there. So I've got to get the water pump back on. That surface is pretty well cleaned up. Why Ford didn't extend that heater core out from the firewall is beyond me, but that makes that job a real bitch. And I can tell someone replaced that one heater hose just by that extension there. And I questioned it earlier, but not questioning it anymore. So that's going to be my move for the upper heater hose as well. The water pump in, starting to work on the heater lines. I have my fans painted, my pulleys painted. They're going to go back in. But hey, we're getting there. So the new rad is in. I had to not use the nut plates and actually bolt it in. It just didn't line up right. That's an eBay special. I've had these before. I've had good luck with them. Heater lines are replaced. The new water pump is in. The fan's on. Pulleys back on. We're okay there. So this part here was a Ford OE part. This lower one, and if you've got a straight 6, you'll notice that this runs real close. Lift that up so you can see to the exhaust manifold. This had been replaced before, but it was hard as a rock and needed replaced again. So I'm glad I actually took the step to do this. So at this point I need to get upper, lower, and then the cooling lines for the transmission installed. Top it off, burp it. And by burp it, I mean I'm going to run it with the cap off. That's going to allow the excess air in the system to free itself. So I'll run it a couple of heat cycles, let the thermostat open, let the thing get all the air out of the system, and then refill as necessary. So that's it. My cooling system's in. I've got the 2 top hoses in. This is a really simple install. Anyone that can work with basic hand tools can do this. So if you've got a straight 6 from the 70s, maybe even to the early 80s, not a whole lot of work here. The radiator is going to be held in with 4 bolts. The water pump's held in with 4 bolts. You have the upper and lower cooling lines. That's going to be a total of 4 clamps. You have the heater hoses, which is also going to be a total of 4 clamps. And your 2 transmission lines if you have an automatic transmission. If you have a standard, they don't really exist. So I'm going to give you a look here. You can take a look at what's done. All in, I'm looking at $220 for this complete install. That's the eBay special radiator. That's the upper and lower hoses, as well as the water pump and heater hoses. All of those were bought at Rock Auto. At $220, that's a pretty good insurance policy. So that's going to wrap up this edition. I hope you enjoyed it. There's going to be other editions where I'm going to put the fuel tank in, the fuel lines, those type of things. Then we're going to get into the brakes. The wheel bearings, I am definitely going to check this time before I go. And hopefully this thing's going to make it all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. So thanks for watching. Until next time, we'll see you.